Now it's a turn of Aleksandra Sekulić, who is developing a PhD in Belgrade. She's got a master in cultural studies, and she's got a degree in general literature studies. And also we invited her as a film director and for her work at the Cultural Center for Decontamination in Belgrade. She was also director of programs, the SKG Belgrade. And just as FIJAVE, it's a collective which has been working with memory in relation to the war and from an artistic and cultural point of view, and also as an activist. So thanks a lot. Let's start. Thanks for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Leo. First, I want to thank you really. Okay. I want to thank you really for this invitation and a chance to participate in this seminar. I'm always surprised how much I learn about the scene and activities and production in our own region, but usually in seminars abroad. And this is also a big learning opportunity for me, so thank you. Well, I was really relieved to hear all those interesting points of our colleagues Andrea and Anna, so I'm a bit now liberated. I can only say I agree with them and then move on and expand maybe on some other parts. And when I read how you articulated the focus of this seminar, I was tempted to do a bit of a, let's say, performance of in these times of memorialization and constant dealing with cultural memory, maybe to again draw some lines of not so obviously connected points in whole process of post-Yugoslav attempts to use resources of Yugoslavia in cultural and public space. So, yeah, in memory studies that would be constitution of the self through autobiographical writing. I think that this kind of Bildungsroman, the determined generation that I belong, was mostly marked with this shifting two frameworks in dealing with Yugoslavia. So, the most obvious one, well, I should say that today, when I see this image of last year's protests in front of an exhibition in the Museum of History of Serbia, which is named In the Name of the People, focusing on communist crimes and this dark side of Yugoslavia. I think that from the point of 2016, this historical revisionism has reached in post-Yugoslav space its peak. So it's marched through institutions, whether in the form of rehabilitation of collaborationists from the Second World War, leading to restitution of their once nationalized property, or just openly marching in the streets in familiar fascist iconography of 20th century, joined with neo-fascist methodology of mobilization all over Europe. It seems a little obsolete to narrate the impossibility of continuities of Yugoslavia in post-war, post-Yugoslav space. Because we came to the final destination of this journey of transition, 55 billions of euros were taken out of Serbia only, and similar money also from Croatia and Bosnia. While the society has been instructed to recognize and defeat enemies, find new and truer values, patriotism, efficient models of privatization, and so on, reforms to EU integration, overcome the inefficient and lazy systems from communist administration. So we see how public education, public health, public space, public culture and social security are gradually slipping to the same wasteland of history, while the infamation of communist regime is conducted by revisionist historiography to cover this slippage. So you see this image where several leftist activists are protesting an exhibition whose methodology, historiographical methodology, was scandalous to illustrate crimes, mistreatment of convicts in Goli Otok campus in 1947 in Yugoslavia. They used images, photographs of Dachau. So it's such a vulgar intrusion of this program of defamation of Yugoslavia, not really taking into consideration any professional standards of science and historiography. That's a sign of this final relief of all the dealing with this Yugoslav memory, which can be very subversive if is reactivated through aspects that our society is now missing. The other framework of dealing with Yugoslavia was its commodification, zombification, I would say, in the meaning that studies of media archaeology give us. So we see, for example, I took these because for us who remember Yugoslavia, those shoes were designed for working women, called Borosana. They would evoke the long process of emancipation of women in Yugoslavia, which was initiated even by anti-fascist lines of women in the Second World War and continued more or less successfully through its systems. But it is now revived in this, let's say, visiting the market of Yugoslavia after the normalization process. So this nostalgia and evocation of Yugoslav brands turned out to be very lucrative. So we notice how those dismembered, this dismembered body of Yugoslavia is constant resource of partial revival. So we see these working shoes for employed women now sold to hipsters, while in Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia and Serbia, we see constant retraditionalization and loss of those equality, results of the struggle of equality for women. I put it parallel to an exhibition on Yugoslavia, which was done in the Museum of History of Yugoslavia. We saw an exhibition that took place there in 2009, which determined a lot, and I will also mention it after our own practices. But this exhibition is one of similar methodologies, usually timed to have visitors who come back from diaspora to visit their families in summer or winter vacations. So this visit to a country, tourism to a country that doesn't exist, leads to a variety of projects from film to art, but also to this cultural tourism or bigger manifestations of exoticization. And it all has this imperative of spreading markets to regions. So Yugoslavia is a sign which I wanted to show is on the market since its disappearance and during the war of its destruction. I wanted to just make a referential context system for specific local Serbian society, problems that I will turn to. For example, Yugoslavia was also continuity of Yugoslavia was one of the paroles of Slobodan Milošević regime and one of the justifications of his war politics, while the democratic change was understood by majority of people in Serbia as a final overthrow of red bandits. And we see the red star being taken off in 1997 from Belgrade City Assembly. This is Zoran Đinđić. Later he was assassinated in 2003. Unlike usual celebrations of overthrowing communism in Eastern Europe, nobody damaged this star. It was, I heard from my colleague from the center who was present, Zoran Đinđić, who was dealing with, who was a Marxist and 68er at the time, he said this belongs to museum now. So there was a certain respect and not so much of obvious celebration there. Of course, the opposition that was celebrating the day was comprised of both right-wing and left-wing. It was a really variety of political options there. But I think this confusion of continuity of Yugoslavia that was forged in a way by this fake leftist party of Slobodan Milošević and this overthrow in the name of transition to liberal capitalism and democracy is confusion that is still dealing with Yugoslavia in institutional framework in Serbia. Now, before I do this, maybe, can somebody help me just to start the film? To start the film, I'm not used to deal with Mac. I'm sorry, I'm a bit illiterate with this. I will now explain what my first challenge to talk about Yugoslavia in past was. It was this. Yeah, okay, thank you. So we will see now a film which was made in 1970s actually, about the building of the first satellite station, Ivanjica, Yugoslavia. Satellite station was built with this projection of future communication. So in Dunav Film, one of the film production houses in Yugoslavia, this film was made, which depicts how human communication developed, how position of future satellite station looked like with rural, pastoral, idyllic scenes, and then how Japanese and Yugoslav engineers combined the parts arriving from all over the world into satellite station, a center for scientific research with their own internet at the time in the 70s. The satellite station was bombed in 1999 by NATO. This film was found on flea market in Belgrade. It was the only documentation of its existence. At the time, there was a usual methodology, practice of artists to go to flea markets and collect those parts fallen off the history table and revive them, reactualize them, like Zoran Oskovsky or Dragan Papić. Okay. What we hear actually is an intervention. So after finding this film, the group, multimedia group, interdisciplinary group, Kosmoplovci in 2000 made the first screening in Remont Gallery of found films, and this one they decided to record from the other side of the screen, because we are now beyond 2000. We crossed the boundaries of the future that was imagined in this film, a future that we failed. So it was filmed from the other side of the screen. That's why Yugoslavia and the maps are reverse. The only intervention made in digitization is the music. They respected the film and they just added the music. Kosmoplovci chose that name for their group, inspired by a magazine, Kosmoplov, from Yugoslavia that was promoting cosmonautics. You see how communications, long-distance communication took place in the villages. Sorry, it was distracting. Before satellite station. That's where it will be built. So Kosmoplovci were dealing with the images of the future from the past, dealing with this horizon that was open of this, how they called it, scientific and technological optimism, the teleological place, status of science in socialist Yugoslavia, and popular science that was available, accessible to Yugoslav youth. They quoted manifest Kosmoplov, universe does not belong to any nation. Soon Yugoslavs will also participate in conquering universe and we should prepare. And this magazine would bring news from NASA, from Zvezdani Grad in Moscow, from all powers of cosmonautics, although we didn't have any. So we were updated just in case we get the chance to also participate in universe conquering. I will now do something bad, and I will jump. It's pretty long, so I want you just to see. It's okay. This film was twice screened and presented in October Art Salon in Belgrade, which is the biggest manifestation of visual arts, international manifestation. First time when it was screened, people thought that it's some kind of techno-fetishism and nobody understood what's going on, and it was completely misunderstood. Second time, we chose I was at the time part of this collective Kosmoplovci, we chose to exhibit it in Yugoslav Gallery in Belgrade, because this was actually a monument in a way, not only to non-existing satellite station, but to this modernistic project of Yugoslavia. And Yugoslav Gallery in the center of the city was perfect for contextualizing a bit, so many other objects were following this work. And I recalled yesterday when I was talking to some colleagues, even then it was not visible because this gallery was guarded by a student intern, and she was too afraid to activate the video beam and computer. She was afraid that something will be broken. So whenever I visited the gallery, it was just an empty wall where satellite station would be, because of the fear that something might break, and there was only marginal information, still very mystifying to this satellite station that no longer exists through film and not existing at all in the gallery space. So all existence and non-existence of this satellite station evoked actually a question of capacity of a Yugoslav gallery to use its own resources of Yugoslav memory. In a way, this anecdote shows, and it is an introduction of this incapacity of cultural infrastructure that, in my experience until now, really varied, but in a way it was a nice anticipation. So before we finish, I just want to see how the result was imagined. This is also bombed object, the tower in Avala Mountain, so there are two ghosts in this film at the time. So communication would go from each part of Yugoslavia to Belgrade, then from satellite station to satellite over the oceans and throughout worldwide. So the end users, that's very interesting, are businessmen, directors who will improve international communication that way. Yeah. So that's a point where I was, that's a point where I was first challenged to present the past. Until then, I think the important context of cosmopolity and their thank you. And their creation is lo-fi video movement. That's one of those impossible continuities of Yugoslavia from the 1990s. This term lo-fi video refers to an organized and coordinated production, distribution, and presentation of film and video whose models of production and representation and continuity with Yugoslav cine amateurism in collaboration with the international movement microcinema enabled involvement of vernacular production together with artistic production in the process of a new language of alternative culture in Serbia in public communication in microcinema audience. So, shortly after its emergence as a public call, bring whatever you made, video, film, we will screen everything without selection, in 1997 as one initiative of students of the same Dunov school that we saw produced the satellite station. Dunov school in the 90s remained curriculum for film directors and practitioners, and that's where Želimir Žilnik, Dušan Makavejev, all the big names of Yugoslav Black Wave would be lecturers, teach younger people about the variety of self-organized film practice, because in the 1990s thinking film was almost impossible considering how crumbling was the whole production infrastructure and how expensive film production was. So this liberation through examples of cinema clubs and self-organized practice initiated several of students of film school to establish this continuity with Yugoslav cinema amateurism. So it was stated in the manifest. Although it emphasized the video technology as the advantage in the process of encouraging wider participation, it also embraced the computer demo scene, recognized its new approaches to common, shared, and collective authorship, as well as its model of online performance of real-time pieces as the anticipation of the new field of action. So film, video, and computer demo was format programming of lo-fi video. So the model of self-organized, unpredicted, no low budget or non-institutional production was recognized as a response to an increasingly predictable culture. For this activity, the inspiration was proclaimed to be derived from the concept of amateurism developed in socialist Yugoslavia, as stated by Katarina Sivić in the first academic paper on non-professional film scene in 2001. So the quote is, "Cine amateurism as the self-organized activity of working people, a form of revolutionary movement in culture and arts towards annihilation of class divisions, the creators of artistic value and audience, which only passively consumes the cultural goods." So when I was, in a way, delegated to present this movement in the infrastructure of contemporary art and many of the festivals of new media at the time popular in the centers for contemporary art in Eastern Europe, this one, for example, is in Kiev, I noticed that we don't actually have the proper instruments to explain this surplus that we have in the company of our Eastern European friends. It was like actually lo-fi video was affirmation and attempt to smuggle through the transition practice, a mechanism of thinking film freely. This lo-fi, no budget, low budget self-organization has a tradition in democratization of film culture. So in such occasions, usually Eastern Europe was exoticized. It was the whole process of constituting former West through East. So this surplus was eluding my capacities to theoretically somehow explain them. And in the meantime, we had the culture of enthusiasm, which was nicely explained in the work of Neil Cummings' project Enthusiasm, dealing with Polish cinema, amateurism, cinema clubs. But just recently we established this, finally, continuity with what Aldo Miluchnić in his text Radical Amateurism calls radical amateurism. So, according to Aldo Miluchnić, radical amateurism describes the amateur practice and cultural practices as part of neo-avant-garde art practices of the late 60s and early 70s, as well as the 80s alternative culture in the former Yugoslavia, and those could be interpreted precisely as an opposition to the presupposed professionalism of the cultural elite at the time. It represents a movement aesthetically unburdened by the media and materials used in their work, but the one which was participating in spontaneous ideology of immediate radical intervention in cultural, social, and political spheres of Yugoslav society. So, in years of claiming continuity with Yugoslav cine amateurism and wider spectrum of practices, because lo-fi video movement was also connected with alternative author comics, music, electronic arts, the whole interdisciplinarity of the movement also evoked some of the problems that interdisciplinary thinking had and made some alternative infrastructure in Yugoslavia. So we finally somehow found a way to, let's say, claim continuity with this particular radical amateurism. And now, in defining what is radical towards this state orientation to democratization of art and culture production through amateurism, amateurism is not something unknown otherwise, but radical amateurism would be a decision that is made to step out of academic or gallery space, cinematographic production infrastructure, and to function and intervene in that field from outside. So radical gesture would be self-exclusion and finding and establishing some parallel or alternative modes of production. For amateurism, it's funny that actually it was a priority of socialist culture, but soon it was marginalized, and in a paradoxical way, that marginalization, peripheralization of Yugoslav cine-amateurism in the 60s and 70s enabled several generations to experiment because they were on the periphery of this big cinematography. So in failing its presupposed priority of amateurism as a cultural and educational policy in socialist Yugoslavia, it triggered some of serious experiments later. So I'm really happy that Andrea was speaking before me yesterday. We really like Chantal Mouffe in our post-Yugoslav spaces. We use it often. Here we actually wanted to see how do we call those practices political. In which way they affected the societies. So, if we turn to our favorite Chantal Mouffe, this political art is a mechanism of reactivation and destabilization of the fixed elements of society that makes visible what the dominant consensus tends to obscure and obliterate. So this radical contingency and precarity of the fixed elements is in question. And alternative film and video in Yugoslavia and later in Serbia, through their aesthetic models developed in experimental film practice, enabled a field of destabilization of the fixed elements in film and media, also wider culture and society, shifting from this predicted position on the periphery to alternative culture and showing those elements of the identities fixed in the structure of the socialist Yugoslavia, I like how Aldo Miloknić also defined what we call now socialist modernism, this professionalization of culture in the 70s, especially later resulting in cultural diplomacy of Yugoslavia. So, relation of the professional, non-professional work in education and culture, its radical gesture can be observed as an interpellation into the apparatus of the production. And coming to this, with all my colleagues from Kosmoplovci and Lofavido and collectives stemming from this movement, actually continued in 2000s after this peak of Lofavido, which was extinct in 2003, actually closed as a project not to be betrayed afterwards in more intense commodification and marketing. So after that, the mechanisms, the rethinking of film apparatus was, let's say, one of those issues that we wanted to transfer to future. So I will have to be faster because it's a very extensive production in which culture and public infrastructure, those interventions and carrying on this part of memory of Yugoslavia could take place actually. In describing this field of public discourse of Yugoslavia in Serbia in 2000s, I would make 2 points crucial. So after the 1990s, when Yugoslavia was either exoticized on East European wave or this defamization of communist crimes was taking place, in 2000s, civil society in Serbia gathered around an anti-war movement in Center for Cultural Decontamination, which I, as a student at the time, was only visiting. Now I work there. They made this long-term project called Moderna. I brought 2 of those bulletins, so you can, I will leave it here, those are also in English. Moderna was an attempt to smuggle part of Yugoslav experience, emancipatory practice of Yugoslav modernism, through a longer continuity stemming from 1918, through transition times, and to establish a platform for new cultural policy in new Serbia, now in process of transition and democratization. So this older cultural workers, professors, art historians gathered around this idea, also from the region. There is a very touching letter, for example, of Dubravka Ugrešić in the issue Anti-Fascism, that she writes at the time that it's very hard for her to it was hard for her to imagine a time when death to the fascism, freedom to the people, parole of Yugoslav partisans would be refers death to the people, freedom to fascism. It was 2001. And at the time, Museum of History of Yugoslavia was an empty wasteland waiting for its end, or maybe invasion of some new content. And part of this project, Moderna, was performance Bordel of Warriors in what appeared to be a deserted space of Yugoslavia, completely emptied and emptied of previous Yugoslav significance and meaning. That was, we here can see in this picture Professor Irina Subotic and Jerko Denegri, together with historian Dubravka Stojanović at this initial Moderna 2001. It was happening in several places, even in restaurants in Belgrade, where famous discussions would take place in 20th century, museums, memorial center in Avala mountain in Belgrade. So for 2 years almost, this knowledge was accumulated in a new proposition to so-called democratic authorities for new, what if we don't choose national identity and identity politics? What if we choose modernism to be the fundament for future cultural policy? Failed, never understood. As such, it was too dangerous. So this democratic, at the time I didn't understand, but now perfectly makes sense, which I will come back to later. So 2 years ago, we made a revisit to Moderna on the occasion of the, actually provoked by the jubilee of the First World War in Europe, where historical avant-gardes, which were dealt with as origins of some emancipatory politics in Yugoslavia, in original Moderna, now we saw how they're decontextualized, castrated from any political programs they had, and fetishized in this military euphoria in 2014. So we staged another Moderna 13 years later. We invited the same professors, as you can see, who discussed with younger researchers, and one of the interesting things we did, Gal Kirn organized a court trial to Boris Groys because of what he said. So, in a way, that's one. Moderna is one very important memory punctum of Yugoslavia. The other would be the exhibition Political Practices of Post-Yugoslav Art. I'm sorry, this is too early, which I didn't put in my presentation. I knew that Ana Devic is here and she can do it much better. That concludes the first decade of 2000s in a best way. It was again in the Museum of History of Yugoslavia, so in the meantime, I think this exhibition proved this constant struggle to find a way, method, and also responsive infrastructure for critical dealing with resources from Yugoslav memory. Resources for actualization, I agree. They're all potentialities, and as such, for me, relevant practices are treating them as triggers for our current potentials. So, one of the institutions I recognized and worked with in reviving radical amateurism notions was Student City Cultural Center. The Cultural Center was the result of 1968 student protests in Belgrade after a big student rebellion and a big battle of students and police near Student City, where thousands of students are accommodated, student campus. Tito decided to, let's say, articulate in a way this story. Like, students do have right to their cultural needs, because initially the initial fight of students happened in the Student City because they couldn't access some cultural center music festival. So now, going back to this initiation of protest, he said we should give them proper infrastructure for their culture. In the meantime, while this marble state-of-the-art cultural center was built in the student campus, headquarters or the house of state security was given to students at the Student Cultural Center in the center of Belgrade, and that's where art practices were developing afterwards, very well known from the art group that operated there, for example, Marina Abramović, probably the most known, but also many other. So this was the brother of Student Cultural Center, but remotely in Novi Beograd, New Belgrade, across the river in student campus where thousands of students live in marble. It was very fancy at the time, a pearl of Yugoslav modernism. I now remember that in 2006 we had this Lost Highway expedition, and it ended in, mostly initiated by Stealth Group and Kyong Park and architects. It ended in Student City, and they were really impressed with the architecture from 1976 and all those marble spaces. What I found there is part of this cultural center is Academic Cinema Club, from one of the most active from 1960s, was moved in 1976 from the center of the city, where it was very subversive and making very subversive programs. It was moved on the periphery of the city in student campus and became Academic Film Center. Many continuities are seen there in the practice, but they are so marginalized on this periphery that even as a student inhabitant of Student City in the 1990s, I had no idea about their existence. It was completely unknown. And for me, it was a big surprise to find the archive of alternative film and video with films of Tomislav Gotovac and many other big artists, very relevant artists. And not only that, but to find alive and well Tomislav Gotovac making remake of those films in Belgrade after 40 years. We see here a poster of this remake, 2006, where he did a remake of film Straight Line, Circle, and Blue Rider, in the exactly same locations in Belgrade after 42 years. That was one of my biggest experience. Very exciting to rediscover your city through this attempts to organize reenactment, not reenactment, but revisit. I think, just a second, yeah. While we are at Tomislav Gotovac, the next film he revisited was, I will make it quick. So this was this impossibility that was performed. Actually, the premiere of his film South Peanuts Hot Club of France, where he re-edited his student films made in Student City in 70s. Right-wing protesters interrupted the screening with claims that he's that's Ustashi pornography. So he shouldn't do that in Serbian capital. It was they pulled off the light, so it was dark, and they were shouting from the stage. Tomislav Gotovac, being himself, he was laughing, and he said, "We did exactly the same when we were young." But never mind. It was a very tense situation, because police was almost liking those young boys and put a big pressure on us, actually, as organizers, and tried to break the premiere themselves. We stopped them, and premiere went on. The screening went on. Here we see Tomislav Gotovac with Slobodan Šijan, and in their cooperation and inspired by them, many of those ideas were later shaped in festivals, alternative film video, and some other projects in the Student City. Another attempt to, let's say, examine what is practice of Yugoslavia is a videography of the region. I used the support of Ministry of Culture that I got in this cultural center to make a shifting map of what is called region. Region always hides Yugoslavia in most actual way at the time. Sometimes it's Western Balkans or Southeast Europe or Mediterranean. So each year culture, I would define region differently, and another unknown concept was video. What is video? So from visual anthropology, here we see a workshop of Naško Križnar from OHO group with students in Student City of visual anthropology, and Tomislav Gotovac insisted that he wants also to participate as a student in his. So we have this transfer of their experience in a way with to younger generations of students. And Andrea Kuluncic, who also participates in this project, is here with Jelena Vesic, also defining another problems of the region. In the end, I wanted to, after this constant interrupting of right-wing organizations into our programs, I realized that actually Student City was the result of student protests. In 2008, everybody were celebrating the anniversary of student protests. Usually it was a bit of cultural tourism and nostalgia and marketing, and but coming from this place, I couldn't afford being on this slippery way. So at the time I called on to Boris Buden's definition of culturalization, a concept of culturalization. So I treated this cultural center, marble cultural center, as a monument of culturalization of student political requests into cultural infrastructure, as a tomb that closed a space where thousands of students could actually gather, and now reproduces film and theater programs from Belgrade cultural centers. So we made an exhibition of student magazines. We realized that there's not a single library or archive in Belgrade that has all the student magazines from '68, which determined a lot of future history of Yugoslavia. So from personal archives under the bed and so on, we collected them and made this initial exhibition and some of art installations that were usually in popular culture connected to '68, called Mrdalice. So that's, I think, my only so far and first experience to actually realize the vision of the project. When you write a project and you write a vision, what happened is that I heard students saying, why don't we have a protest? And that's what I actually wrote. I want to encourage students to think about their role in society. So that was my miracle project. Something happened. They saw some films that were forbidden about Student City, about students then, and really in several years they connected with colleagues from the region, and there was a coordinated student rebellion. Again, of course, we see Gotovac and Šijan and Branko Vučićević commenting on those connection of culture and student rebellion. Media archaeology project is one of those examples I could present on some other occasion, but this initiative to examine some parts and media forms used in Yugoslavia, very specific, like youth show about revolutionary past, rock and roll about revolutionary past to Yugoslavia, or music videos and so on. We would make research with our colleagues from the region, and we participated in post-Yugoslav in political practice of post-Yugoslav art, dealing with media practices of Yugoslav youth. Propulsive television was a phenomenon that we dealt most with. I will just mention briefly the history of Yugoslav scene amateurism was continued in cooperation with Branka Benčić on the case of MAF big festival. On that occasion we digitized the magazine F that was not accessible to our art curators. Later I continued the cooperation with Branka Benčić and in Museum of Contemporary Art in Belgrade, in cooperation later with Museum of Contemporary Art in Zagreb. We realized the extension of this research of not only mechanisms of scene amateur clubs and experimental films, but moved to the next phase of liberating thinking about cultural and artistic practices. So it was the exhibition Video Television Anticipation, anticipation. So just in short, anticipation is a built-in perspective which we intend to reveal by certain epistemology of forgetting, or evoking the pre-sense of future of art and media as a horizon of video, as a practice in its initial exploring antagonistic relations to television. In the entire cultural space of former Yugoslavia, we can recognize continuity and anticipation in regarding the film production of cinema clubs in pioneering work of video art. So this exhibition connects works from several decades. At the same time, as the television has shaped the specific aesthetics, art is shaped by television, and the works of artists presented in the exhibition are questioning the cultural impact of television and its authority. So, making an overview of history of freedom, as it was claimed by the practices of video, we are in the process of getting back its future and revealing the potential which is now accessible and, in its course, anticipated. So, I think those are the works that we and authors that we involved in this exhibition, whether through their participation in discussions and with their works. And this is a nice introduction to our next speaker. This is Dalibor Martinez, that was also participating in this exhibition. It had several formats, and well, talking about future, this was just a very shortened overview of a complex story about incapacity of culture and art gallery infrastructure for using resources of memory of Yugoslavia as some actual relevant instruments for rethinking the present. And that's why my final example would be D-shaping, where I gathered my colleagues from the region, many of the artists who went through the education in the end of Yugoslav experience through the war and its destruction, and now in position to teach. And we talked about this possibility to articulate this experience and maybe make it also a resource for coming generations, because there is a big misunderstanding waiting there in this transfer of experience. And we see one of the Yugoslav monuments that we mentioned today on Sutjeska, which is approached here by Igor Bošnjak in his work Transformers. So those shifting shapes of Yugoslav memory and monumental practice inspired him. He lives in works in Trebinje, very near this monument. So I will be so I think we should now prepare for Dalibor Martinez. Thank you. I was a bit...